Muhammad commit shirk? Let's talk about it. Quran and me as a kuffar here. Shut your 66:1 puts a spotlight on one of the most shocking moments in Muhammad's life and raises an unavoidable question. If shirk, associating partners with Allah, is Islam's ultimate sin, why does Muhammad's behavior here seem to fit the bill? So what happened in Quran 66:1? Here's what the verse says. O Prophet, why do you prohibit yourself from what Allah has made lawful for you, seeking the approval of your wives? Okay, so what's going on here? Contrary to popular Islamic belief, this wasn't about honey and Muhammad's bad breath. According to Islamic sources like Tafsir al-Jalalain and Ibn Kathir, this verse is about Muhammad and Mary the Copt, his concubine, yes, a sex slave. The story goes that Muhammad was getting cozy with Mary in his wife Hafsa's house on her special day. Hafsa found out and understandably was freaked out, and Muhammad tried to smooth things over by promising to stay away from Mary. In other words, he made something halal, permissible, haram, forbidden.
The very tafsir he quoted, being a Tabari, says that both stories are possible, and many scholars in the tafsirs of this passage deem this story with Maria the Copt as being inauthentic due to it being disconnected. The honey story is better attested to in both Bukhari and Muslim, but this story isn't really relevant. Whatever story may have occurred, the main point is that the Prophet, upon whom be peace, forbade something for himself to please his wives. Let's continue to see what sort of idiotic point Testify then makes.
Halal, permissible, haram, forbidden. Q Quran 66:1, where Allah steps in and basically says, why are you making this a prohibition? That is not okay. So what's the big deal? You see, the Quran takes a hard stance on shirk, the idea of associating partners with Allah. Quran 931 goes after Jews and Christians for obeying rabbis and monks who made things halal or haram without God's permission. It says they have taken their rabbis and their monks as lords besides Allah. Muhammad clarified this, and it's recorded in Tafsir ibn Kathir. Adi ibn Hatim narrated, they did not worship them, the rabbis and monks, but they obeyed them. The Prophet said, yes, they did. When they made something lawful, they considered it lawful. And when they made something unlawful, they considered it unlawful. So obeying the rabbis and monks, that, according to Muhammad, is shirk. Following their human rules instead of Allah's is elevating them to the place of Allah. And here's the crazy part. In Quran 66:1, Muhammad does the exact same thing. He prohibits what Allah made lawful. If it's shirk for the rabbis and the monks, why isn't it shirk for Muhammad?
At this point, I don't know why he makes these videos. It makes Christian apologetics look pathetic. And if this is really the best you guys have, then this just shows the strength of Islam. I use arguments that had Testify calling a student of the author of the Gospel of John a heretic, calling him someone that didn't believe in the Trinity, but rather believed Jesus to be lesser than the Father.
Okay, so I mean, at best, that shows, I think he's more of like a subordinationist or something like that. But
no, I agree.
Like,
I
again,
agree. He also says that Jesus doesn't know the hour, and he says that the Father excels with respect to knowledge compared to the Son because Jesus says, "My Father is greater than I." Do you understand? So he's a subordinationist. So I don't know why you brought him up. So do you want to go to Tertullian or who do you want?
While Testify uses arguments that are complete misrepresentations of the text and just are frankly weak. The reason it's not the same between the Prophet and the rabbis and monks is because the Prophet was not legislating a religious ruling. He didn't intend for people to obey this rule that he made for himself. The examples of the monks and rabbis allowing stuff that is haram or prohibiting stuff that is halal is, for example, monasticism in Christianity, and the rabbis allowing the consumption of usury. The Prophet, although he is an example for us and his actions are legislative at times, they aren't always rulings from him. Only when the Prophet intends for people to take it as a ruling does it then become a legislation. And if this legislation wasn't from God and he intended for people to follow this religious legislation, then it would be shirk. Had the Prophet said or implied that this prohibition extended to his followers when Allah didn't intend so, then it would be shirk, you absolute jahil. Allah's disapproval is at the fact that it was now ambiguous as to whether this should be followed by the Muslims as a legislation from Allah. This has happened in the past, where Jacob, peace be upon him, prohibited for himself the consumption of camel meat. Jews later took this prohibition for himself as something that extended to the Jews to follow, as they followed Jacob's example. So they wrongfully ascribed something to Allah in doing so. That doesn't mean Jacob performed shirk. He didn't intend for it to be taken as a legislative practice. So to ensure that the Muslims don't fall into the same issue, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure the Prophet, upon whom be peace, didn't forbid anything for himself unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forbidden it for him.
The rabbis and the monks, why isn't it shirk for Muhammad? So let's tease this out in the form of a syllogism. Premise 1. According to Quran 931, obeying humans who prohibit what Allah has made lawful constitutes shirk regardless of intent. Premise 2. In Quran 66:1, Muhammad prohibited what Allah had made lawful, his relationship with Mary the Copt. Conclusion. Therefore, Muhammad's action in Quran 66:1 constitutes shirk as defined in Quran 931.
Premise 1 is so stupid. The premise should be that the person forbids it as a matter of a religious ruling. If I tell my son he can't eat candy, even though candy is halal, does that mean I'm doing shirk? Or if I tell my wife I'll spend more time with her and will forbid myself from seeing my friends on the weekends, does that mean I'm doing shirk? You're such a clown, honestly.
1. Now, if you're a Muslim, you might be thinking at this point, okay, but Muhammad wasn't making a new law. It was just a personal vow, right? But Muhammad isn't just anybody. According to Quran 33:21, he's the ultimate role model for Muslims. His actions aren't just personal, they set an example for everyone.
Yes, and that's exactly why someone may misinterpret his personal oath as legislative, and that's what was wrong.
For everyone. And according to Quran 931, this isn't about intent. Jews and Christians didn't think they were committing shirk by following their rabbis and monks, but the Quran says that they were. So even if Muhammad didn't mean to commit shirk, does that really matter?
Intention does matter pertaining to what the person is looking to forbid. If you're looking to forbid something legislatively in the religion where that prerogative is for God alone, such as saying it's halal to eat pork or that it is haram to eat meat, then this in its nature is religious rulings being mandated by other than God. But if you were to say I won't eat meat anymore, not because I consider it haram, but rather because I want to please my wife who doesn't want my breath to stink of meat, then that's not shirk, you bozo.
Corrected Muhammad right away, so it's no big deal. But hold on, doesn't shirk carry huge consequences? Quran 448 calls it the unforgivable sin. So if somebody commits shirk, even if it's for a short time, it's still shirk. Plus, if Allah's correction...
Yeah, no Muslim who has a speck of knowledge would say it's possible the Prophet upon whom be peace did shirk. He was just corrected, so it's okay. The Prophets are free from major sins. Now, if it was shirk, Allah would have been more stern in his correction rather than just asking him why he would be condemning this action. Also, why would Allah be willing to be condemning the actions of the wives, saying that they can potentially be replaced if they don't amend their ways, over them keeping secrets from the Prophet? However, the Prophet of God and representative of pure monotheism merely gets a question asked of him when he performs something infinitely worse. That does not make any sense at all.
66:1 puts them in a tough spot. If shirk, the worst sin in Islam, happens when anyone, knowingly or not, prohibits what Allah allows, how does Muhammad's action not qualify? And if it doesn't, what does that say about the Quran's clarity and consistency?
What does this have to say about the state of Christian apologetics that you guys resort to such garbage arguments? That's a better question to be asked.